I do want to spend a little bit of time on the actual participants in the WTA Finals. Props to Rybakina for getting back out there. I think the big news story of the week, even going in, was her picking up Goran Ivanisevic as a coach. Not on my radar, right? I think we kind of silo. This guy's a coach for men. He has been a coach for men. Cilic, Djokovic. He hasn't gone to the women's side yet. I think it's great that he did. But it seems like we kind of trade around the same coaches and they go in a circle on the WTA Tour a little bit. Wasn't on my radar. I was surprised by it. But also, the more I thought about it, I'm going, oh, this is a great hire. This is potentially a great hire, right? They both are super tall. They both hit spots. They both have massive serves. The two players that Goran has worked with, Cilic and Novak, hit hard flat through the court, right? That is a match for Rybakina as well. They both won Wimbledon. They're both good on the same surfaces. And most importantly, the credibility that Goran brings to the camp, and also the levity that he might bring, right? The guy has a personality, completely has a personality where he's always in on the joke, right? And coming off of this borderline toxic relationship of Rybakina's with her last coach, the more I thought about it, the more I like this hire. Why am I wrong, JW?
Oh, man. Can't we argue about something besides supply and demand? No, I think you're totally right. I think part of this is about the tennis. Here are two players. They both won Wimbledon. Goran, how do you build? The serve is a great weapon, but how do you build around that? And I think you're right. I think this is probably, and I don't know. I mean, this is really a player who is cloaked and shrouded in mystery. Rybakina, we've talked about it before. I mean, this is not someone who is particularly candid, nor does she have to be. But I think it's safe to assume this is clearly, if it's about tennis, it's also about temperament. And you said it. This is someone who could use a little more levity and joy, and she gets it with Goran. And I talked to him a fair amount. I didn't cover him necessarily, but I got to know him a bit through the Novak camp. And he's a real, he's sort of a jokester, and he's funny, and he's good company, but he also really knows tennis. I was really impressed with him. He's sort of portrayed, at least, he predated me a little bit, but it always seemed like the goofy guy who's kind of the butt of his own joke and couldn't get out of his own way, and sort of the tennis clown who sits in the back row. And then you talk to him as a coach, and he's really insightful and perceptive, but then finishes the anecdote with a funny story. I mean, it's a real sort of, it's a good combination, I think. And I think in this case in particular, the more laughs, the better, because that's not something you necessarily see with Rybakina, who's really still in the prime of her career. And there's a lot of, she hadn't played a match since the US Open. She's had these blocks. We've had this sort of, these mystery illnesses. There's a lot of speculation that she doesn't tend to confirm, but let's not forget, this is a player who's come within a couple points of winning multiple majors at this point, who's only 23, 24 years old. There's a lot of upside here. And I think this could really be a combo to watch in 2025.
Yeah. And frankly, if you're someone who has the track record, both as a player and a coach as Goran, you want someone who is a proven star. And also you feel like there's a lot of runway. Does he look at Rybakina and say, hey, this is someone who can rip off 2, 3, 4 slams? Sure. Under the right circumstances, if we do good work and we hit a certain moment in time, sure. There's no one that says she's not one of the top 2 or 3 contenders at any slam outside of Roland Garros, probably. So I like this. I would have never thought of it. It was not on my radar. It came out and I was kind of almost a little like happily stunned. But I think it's great. Qinwen Zheng is still playing well. Still has a matchup problem with Sabalenka. Loses her first match there to her, and the swing is a little big on the forehand, and Sabalenka just peppers it, goes through it. Zheng is better than everyone on earth, maybe at this moment, except for Sabalenka over the last 6 weeks. It is a bit of a matchup problem. Props for Swiatek for coming back post-US Open. I gave her props on another show for saying, a lot of people say, I'm exhausted, the tour is too long, and then they sign up for 4 more exhibitions. She's actually said, I'm burnt out. This is too much. I need to make a change, yada, yada, yada. Actually did it. Hasn't played since losing to Pegula in the quarters of the US Open. Came back, got through her first match. Just an uber professional. Paolini is a great story this year. I mean, just going from never having been past the second round of a slam to now being 4 in the world is just awesome. And she does it with a smile on her face. Fantastic. I think Coco has actually looked great post US Open. I almost feel like she needed to get through that tournament and that title defense to kind of open up a little bit. And one thing I have noticed, JW, the serve looks way better. And I know she double faulted some, and I think it was in Wuhan, but the grip is better, right? So if I can do it on my iPhone and you can see it all, it's kind of been, as the year's gone on, she's kind of opened it at the start. It's more straight on. And what I'm seeing is that you're not getting the double faults where one is, 3 feet below the net line and the next one is 5 feet long. The variance in misses is way less. And so credit to Matt Daly, who I don't think anyone had on their bingo card, and probably wrongfully so, because he's done, he's been a good coach, as having this job permanently. It went to, okay, Matt Daly, and who's she going to hire past that? He's making a hell of a case just to let's let it ride into 2025. Why do we need a celebrity coach? She's made a little bit of a grip change on her serve. I think it looks way better. I think as the year progressed, she kind of started turning the crank over and over and over a little bit more and maybe got herself into a bit of a bad habit. So credit for Daly for realizing that and switching it. Forehand looks like she's getting the racket back and prepared a little bit more often, so she doesn't have to do as much work late in the swing and play catch up. And that's it. I mean, I think it's just a great showcase, and you just wish more people were in attendance and giving the energy credit that these women deserve.
Go back to Coco for a second, because, people like me can look at the stats and see that the double faults actually are looking a lot better than they did when she lost in the US Open, but we don't necessarily see the grip change. I mean, how impressed should we be by the fact that instead of taking off 3-4 months to really address these technical issues, she's kind of, what's the cliche? She's like building the plane while she's flying it, but seems to be addressing some of these technical issues while she's playing a full schedule. That, from afar, to me, that's impressive and professional and commendable.
Yeah, well, I think it has something to do. I mean, she said after she lost to Navarro and hit, I don't know, it was 20-ish doubles, and the third set was pretty painful watching. I could go out right now on the practice court and do 30 of them in a row. So I almost feel like you have to stress test it in actual matches if you're Coco. Because at some point, I think it became a mental thing, even more than the physical improvements that could have been available. And a lot of times, like we say, oh, you got to reconstruct everything. You don't always have to do that. Like if all of a sudden they make this switch on the grip and you're feeling good after 3 or 4 days, and you go stress test it and it's way better, that's a shot of confidence. Like immediately, like it held up 2, 3, 4 matches, right? You can almost lie to yourself that this fixes everything. And I think it's fixed a lot. Like even the variance in misses is a huge tell with serve, whether it's technical flaw, mental flaw, her hitting the top of the racket and it barely clearing the ground before it hits the net. And then the next one's 6 feet long. That is a problem. That's one where I'm watching, I'm going, oh, there is no control. We're just dealing in hope at this point. Whereas even yesterday against Jess, she had a couple doubles, but it was like an aggressive miss where she missed it a foot long. Right? There weren't the ones that were just crawling up the net, hoping to fall into a box somewhere. So even the misses, she could go out and serve 7 doubles in the next match, but there's the way you miss is a big mental tell sometimes. And from where I sit, we're dummy on a couch. It's obvious even with the way she sets up. Like, do you remember the way that actually we talked about Goran kind of opened the racket face so Coco was almost over there. Right? Like when she was in the setup, and now she's a lot more straight on, almost like a Pete, where he would almost point at you. But the rack, his palm wasn't parallel with the ground. So immediately I go, oh, okay, that's different. That's a different look on the serve. And I think she had kind of tweaked it. And, sometimes you develop bad habits and you don't even know how. It's just a little bit at a time, and then all of a sudden it's a real problem. I feel like that's what I think happened this year. With Coco, and I didn't have, I don't have firsthand knowledge of this because I didn't talk to her much about it post Australian Open this year, but it looks great. It looks a lot better. And I think she is the test case for really, really working hard. And to your point, JW, bearing down during this kind of dead part of the year, where maybe the eyeballs are in different places in the sports universe, and has really, really done a great job of correcting. And credit to Matt Daly for going into that situation post Brad Gilbert. It's hard to follow like an iconic coach, make an adjustment, have it work, and just kind of keep your head down and do the work. So props to that whole team.